Welcome to the Humans and Earth podcast. We bring you inspiration and practical resources for healing our planet and ourselves. It is time for soulful contributions that regenerate life on Earth.
I'm Helen Claire Harmon, a thought leader and teacher who believes we're ready to renew Earth and heal ourselves in the process. Welcome to today's episode. I am so happy to have here with us today Dr. Cara Gubbins. Dr. Cara is a scientist, intuitive, and global thought leader for a new way for people and animals to live together in harmony. She is the best-selling and award-winning author of 5 books about the natural history of animals, animal wisdom, and personal growth. For nearly a decade, she has been a successful animal communicator, connecting people more deeply to the animals they love most. She is also the creator of How to Talk to Your Pet, the proven 4-step system that teaches anyone and everyone how to communicate intuitively with their pets or with any animal. Each month in her Animal Wisdom Circle, she guides members to receive spiritual guidance from all kinds of animals, helping everyone become the best versions of themselves that they can be. Twice a year, she hosts online summits, bringing together experts from around the world to share their wisdom on animal communication and healing, conservation, and spiritual growth and evolution. Cara's mission is to inspire our global community to live the lives they're here to live by connecting with animals, nature, and spirit, saying yes to themselves and their dreams, and remembering that there is always time to play. Learn more about her work at caragubbins.com. That's CARAGUBBINS.com. Welcome, Cara. It is so nice to have you here today.
Thank you, Helen.
So, as I mentioned, one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on the podcast is I'm really curious about your process of transitioning from a very conventional career, and it was a scientific career. You began with, I think, 4 degrees in the sciences, including a PhD and a career in ecology. And I would love to hear you tell our listeners, how did it feel to transition from a career pathway where you were not using these, I'll call them spiritual gifts for right now. I don't know if that's your preferred term. How did it feel to transition from a career where you were not using these gifts to a career where you have merged your intuitive gifts with science and spirituality? And for anyone who just heard that funny noise, that's my own dear dog in the background. So tell us about what your transition through this process was like.
For me, it was horrible. And I say that not because I think it's going to be horrible for everybody, but it was really seriously challenging for me because I think that I was really surrounded. I really noticed that I was surrounded by people with very rigid thoughts about what was okay, what wasn't. I love science. I love exploration. I love scientists. And yet the culture in scientific communities can be so small and so limited and so judgmental. And so in a lot of ways, I saw that playing out within the scientific community and not, and even scientists not embracing the scientific process to solve problems, but to go on their opinions and their judgments about how things should be.
I think about that all the time. I have a lot of scientists in my life, and as a historian, I always want to say, don't you realize you're being so closed-minded that you're actually not being scientific?
Exactly. So it wasn't just that the spiritual or the invisible, right? Like the intuitive, that kind of stuff was judged as wrong. It was really a lot of other stuff that I saw a lot of judging going on, which just didn't sit that well with me anyways. But what happened for me was I really absorbed this mindset that it was wrong to be anything other than left brain, scientific, logical, concrete. You can touch it, you can test it. And that was what was the horrible part for me, is I had, since I was a kid, this really spiritual side that I didn't let anybody in the science world see. And, so I felt like I was like hiding, and I was bouncing back and forth. I could be scientific here, but I could be spiritual or intuitive here. And so it was like these two separate worlds that I bounced between. And when I was in one, the other was wrong or bad. And when I was in that one, then the first one was wrong or bad. And it was just a really painful way to live my life.
Because you felt divided, right?
I felt divided in myself.
That myself, and you feel so fragmented, and you don't feel whole in either world.
And there's all these, for me, there were all these feelings of, I'm betraying myself, I'm weak, I should stand up for myself, I should, right? So I was doing all that judgment on myself that I saw outside in the, scientific community, which, now is so clear to me. That's a spiritual process in itself. What's going on outside is really a mirror for what's going on inside. I didn't know that at the time. And that's why I think it was so hard for me, because I had this love of animals and science and learning and exploration. And I also had this love and this longing to do work that was spiritual and that was meaningful and that made a difference on the planet. And while I could see science as important, and I know that my research helped animals, wild animals, that I was studying, and captive animals that I studied for my master's degree, it didn't fill me on the heart and soul level. And that's what I was looking for. And so when I went back to school to get a master's degree in spiritual psychology, that's where I was. I was really, one foot in each world, and not either was on solid ground. And what I wanted was a marriage inside myself of these two parts of me that were equally valid, equally important. And in the process of finding that balance and that harmony and that interaction, I had to really do a lot of looking at what was in the way of that. And what was in the way of that was my belief system. So I had to pull out all these beliefs one by one, and all the emotions that were connected to them, the fear, the worry, I really thought that if I came out of the woo-woo closet, that I would be discounted, that my science would be discounted, that I would be discredited, that I would be rejected and blackballed and disrespected. And so for me, it was, personally very scary. None of that stuff ever happened. This is all my own stuff. But that's, for me, what made it so hard. But that was also, where I got to see how courageous I was to learn to stand up for myself and to speak my truth and to feel comfortable with myself, no matter the audience, and to just say, hey, this is me, like it or leave it, and that's okay. And so that journey was a few years and challenging. And then to be on the other side, though, is so sweet, to just be able to be in the world. And if there's a scientific question, like right now we've got the coronavirus, and I'm doing data analysis. It's like, I love having that ability to see patterns and to analyze and to ask good questions. And I also see the spiritual impact of what's going on our planet right now, and the spiritual awakening that could be happening and all of that. And so I love being able to bring in both perspectives through one human being, because I think we're all of those things. And I think they're all valid and good and necessary and helpful and just part of the whole kaleidoscope of being a human being.
Right. To be our whole selves, which I hope a lot of us are practicing and learning and modeling for other people, because it sounds like for you, looking back now, you see even more clearly how fragmented or divided or incomplete or incompletely expressed you were. And, I really hope that for anyone who has these kinds of inklings and desires that they can feel whole, as it sounds like you do now.
And it's such a worthy desire.
Yes. Yeah.
It really is. It's a worthy desire to have that need inside you to feel whole, to feel complete, to feel self-expressed. Yeah. And, now I've been a professional animal communicator for 10 years. And so now I'm teaching the next generation of animal communicators, and I watch them going through the same thing. And I hope we get to a point where we don't all have to go through the same personal challenges. Yeah. But I have so much compassion for that inner struggle to be able to be yourself, because most of the limitations come from our close contacts, our family, our close friends, our colleagues. We just absorb these limiting beliefs and these beliefs that we have to be a certain way in order to be loved and accepted in the world. And it's really powerful, intense stuff. And so if anybody, in your audience is struggling with that, I just want to say, hey, I hear you. I know it can be very, 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 very hard. and I don't know really anybody currently, really successful in the spiritual, intuitive, woo-woo kind of world who hasn't had to at least confront some of this stuff on some level. Maybe not to the degree that they would say, like I am, like it was horrible. And I'm really glad it's behind me. But I think everybody has to, I think each one of us is becoming more of ourselves. That's why we're here on the planet. And part of that is, how do we come out of whatever closet we put ourselves in? Yeah. Growing up in my family, I was the science one. And so it was really weird for me to come out and be like, no, I'm the spiritual one. And there was resistance, and there was judgment. And I think that's what we're all doing. I think we're all here to become more of who we are.
And it's not just for us, right? I really want to give you plenty of time to talk about your work with animals, because I think it's really important. And this is a huge human quest that we're on right now. But there's resonance, there are benefits or lack of benefits for the other beings with whom we share the planet. And as you know, that's one of the core focus areas of my work. So I would love to hear you talk about what do you think happens when people learn to deeply pay attention to animals through the kind of work that you do?
It's such a great question. I think that the way that I see it is that there's the individual and there's the collective, and we can do the work on ourselves individually. And the more of us that do that individual work, the greater the collective progress is, right? The evolution of humanity. But it has to happen inside each one of us. And I think that, one of the founding principles of the work that I do is that each one of us is a divine being. In fact, like right there, right? Like that was the first book that I wrote about this work, is Divine Beings. And we are, every single one of us is a divine being having an earth experience. It's a lion experience, a butterfly experience, a human experience, a snake experience, but each one of us is divine. And when we see, the divinity in ourselves, we can see it in others. And for many of us animal lovers, it's easiest to see the divinity in the animals. It's way easier than in people for most of us. So, but again, like going back to that whole, spiritual concept of what's outside is a reflection of what's inside. I think that when we start to really embrace the divinity in everything around us, we also embrace the divinity within ourselves, and we heal those old hurts and wounds that we've been carrying around. I think that most of the violence perpetrated in the world comes from wounds inside of ourselves that we're acting out of. And so when I look at situations with animals in particular, of trophy hunting or factory farming, or I spent a lot of time, not a lot, but I spent some time in Thailand with elephants, and many elephants there are chained for their very long lives, and they're basically slaves to humans, for logging, for rides, for tourists, for all kinds of stuff. And as we start to understand that I'm a divine being, you're a divine being, that elephant is a divine being, I think we start to shift out of these old wounds. They get healed as we embrace our divinity and we bring more love through our bodies. Our old wounds get healed, and we are incapable of perpetuating that violence on another being, because we're healed in ourselves and we see ourselves in them. And that's the majority of my work, the Animal Wisdom Circle, the books, the animal communicator readings that I do, the classes that I teach. It's all based on this principle. As we heal ourselves, we heal the world. And and big picture animals, and that's not even getting into the animals that live in our families, right? There's a whole other level of healing that happens there. Mm-hmm. But I think that if we can really at least begin that journey to look into an animal's eyes and see there's a soul in there, just like I have inside of me, that sense of sameness will change the way that we talk. It'll change the way that we behave. It'll change our consumer decisions. It'll change the way that we eat our food, that we get our food, that we have values around the food that we eat, and the choices that we can make for our planet in terms of, ecologically, environmentally, socially. I think that when we start to really understand that we are all divine beings, that everything else starts to shift with it. And I think that fundamentally comes from each individual recognizing it, healing whatever's in themselves that's keeping them from that realization. And then you just go be that person out in the world, and then you start changing everybody else too, because they're like, oh, what does she have that I don't have? Like, why is she so calm and happy? And even though things are really shitty in the world, right? Like, how come she's still balanced and optimistic? And I think that's, a great source of strength and comfort to reside in that place of peace with yourself. Mm-hmm. And then you can go out, and everything you do then becomes an act of love.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was thinking, as you were talking too, about appreciating everything you said along the spiritual lines. I share your beliefs entirely. And also appreciating the way in which science in the last few decades is perhaps moving more in that direction, or at least helping us to gain compassion for animals. I think about the work of Mark Bekoff, emeritus from CU Boulder. I teach his book every year. My students really love it. And I often have students who want to write about the research on animal intelligence and animal emotion, which of course is Bekoff's field. And so I'm hoping eventually, before long, well, in your work, these things have come together, but hopefully science is going to let this train of work that's going on, looking at animal intelligence and emotion and helping us to realize they are fully complex beings like we are. And then we have the work of someone like you who says we can look into their eyes and also see soul, and we can experience that soul, and then we can even go that step of communicating with them.
And I find it really ironic that science doesn't embrace that animals have a similar world experience, because biologically we share 99.5% of our genes with mice. So how do we think, and this is maybe a different conversation, but there's these artifacts of old thinking, right? Like our humanity has evolved in our thinking process, right? So we have this old Descartes dualism. It's either this or that, it's one or the other. If you're either me or not me, and we really saw humans as humans and animals as something separate and different, and that's gotten carried along. But when we look at the biology of all life on Earth, and it all comes from the same source, it's all evolved to fit different niches and different ways of living in the world, and yet the building blocks are all the same. The neurology is all the same. You know, the brains are so similar. It's really ludicrous to me that we would think that there's some, you know, humongous leap of difference between us and other animals. And so that's like always just been this puzzle to me, right? Because I was, you know, raised as a biologist. I got a bachelor's and then a master's and then a PhD. And to me, I was like, well, the science, the biology is really showing me that we're exactly the same. So why do we think we're different? But I also think that our scientific measurement has advanced to measure things that were not measurable 50 years ago.
Right.
Like the energy field around an animal or a human, or the energy field, the change in the energy field that's generated by a specific thought.
Yeah.
Right. So now and quantum physics, you know, everything is energy. When I was a biology student, it was matter or energy. They were totally different things. And now we know they're the same thing because they're all energy. So quantum physics has also really expanded our scientific understanding. And I think that, you know, the challenge for our species is that the culture has to change too. And there's these luminaries like Mark Bekoff and Jane Goodall and Candace Pert, and, you know, these scientists who have said, hey, let's just look at the science of this. Like, let's be scientists. Let's look at it and test it and measure it and be open to what we find. And when we do that, look at what we find.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and I think one encouraging thing is that our culture is changing. I'm not well informed about the history of animal rights, but I certainly know that in the 1800s and the early 1900s, there was no animal rights movement. Whereas by, I don't know, I'm guessing it was probably the 30s, the 40s, the 50s that developed. So that is a step. Obviously, we need to take that way, way farther, but that might be something to be encouraged about. So tell us about how you work with animals. What happens when you connect with an animal? What are animals telling you these days?
So my work is, I think, just, you know, it's really an extension of everything we've talked about, right? Like, these are my interests. This is what I think about. This is what I love doing day in, day out. So a lot of the professional work I do is for people with pets or injured wildlife, you know, those kinds of things with some kind of challenge. And so the focus of a lot of the animal communication that I do is what's going on, what do you need, how can we help you, and that sort of thing. And same for pets, or I've just been working with this injured, it's not a wood stork, it's the crane, sandhill crane in Florida. And it's the same kind of thing, like what's important to you, and how do we honor you and your process, and how can we help you on physical, mental, emotional, spiritual levels of your being. And what I hear from animals is that they're beings on all these levels just like we are, right? Like, they have many, not every single pet that I connect with has this exact conversation, but the majority of them say, hey, I'm here to help my person with this issue. And sometimes that means mirroring that issue to us. Sometimes it means processing something that they're not aware of. A lot of our pets will process grief or insecurities or, you know, those kinds of things on our behalf. And it can be, sorry, something keeps hitting my face. And it can be a really beautiful thing. And often this is what they feel like their spiritual mission is on the planet. And when I talk to pets at end of lifetime, and ask if they're ready to go, most often they say, yes, I'm ready, if they feel like they've fulfilled this spiritual mission. That is the biggest thing. And if for some reason their human hasn't gotten their lesson, they're less likely to say they're ready to go. The other reason they say they're not ready to go is because they haven't said goodbye to people they want to say goodbye to. So, but I think that what I've seen and what I understand about animals and the spiritual makeup of the world really comes from talking to animals directly. I don't have a religious doctrine that says that, you know, this is what happens after animals die. And so what I've learned is from talking to animals who have died and what they tell me about where they are and what they're doing and what's next and how they feel and what they think. And it's been, you know, super obviously mind expanding, but also heart expanding. And it's really helped me personally to have this perspective from animals that there is a bigger experience than just the three-dimensional physical world that we live in, that they're experiencing it too. And that they understand what we're going through and how we feel, and that we're helping them with whatever challenge they're facing. So, and then I also have my animal wisdom circle where we connect with, I have I don't know, a dozen people in that group. And each month we connect with a different species of animal and we talk to that animal. And so where I am in the middle of all this is I get to talk to cats and horses and dogs and turtles and, you know, all these awesome animals that are living with people, but I also get to talk to wild animals who aren't living with people, who are, you know, just living their wild lives. And it's similar. They also have physical concerns, they have spiritual concerns, they have meaningful relationships and meaningful purposes that they want to fulfill. They have messages they want to share about who they are. I had a butterfly tell me that she had reincarnated as a butterfly like dozens and dozens of times because her soul just could not get this lesson about non-attachment. So she came back to relearn it and relearn it and relearn it. And she was finally starting to get it after so many times. But because the lifespan of a butterfly is so short, her soul could like fast track that lesson by being in that physical body. So I feel like I started this 10 years ago just wanting to talk to animals because that was my lifelong dream. And what came out of it was this complete new spiritual worldview of everything, of who I was, where I fit in the world, how the world was created and organized, what was really important, what wasn't so important, what were feelings I was going to feel simply because I had a physical body, and that's part of the wiring of a physical body. And, you know, beings who are out of their physical body, they don't grieve. That's a physical process. So pets who have passed on, their people are like, oh, are they sad? Are they miserable? Are they missing us? And the animals are like, no, we're good. We love you. And they just reside in that place of love because they don't have that physical process of grief going on. So I know I'm really like all over the place in this answer.
No,
but
great.
I think that all of my, you know, everything we've talked about up till now comes from this experience of having conversations with animals and being like a journalist, you know, and a scientist, exploring like, what's it like? Tell me about that. And understanding that perspective of another being.
Yeah. Do you ever have a hard time conversing with an animal? Do you ever encounter a situation in which it's more difficult? I feel like I do just a little bit of animal communication. Like I haven't really developed that, but I can do it a little bit. But I definitely can't do it consistently or, you know, with every animal. So what is that like in your work?
So I really think that we all can do it. I think we are all hardwired. I think that we all have the ability. I always use the basketball analogy. I can play basketball, but really, not as good as Shaquille O'Neal, or I don't even know who the basketball players are these days. But also, I don't have a love for basketball that I'm willing to go and practice for several hours a day to get better. And I think animal communication is the same. I think that there are, it's teachable, it's learnable. There are tools that you can use. There are ways that you can practice that make it more reliable, more accurate. And I employ those tools so that I have the greatest chance of success when I have a client who comes to me and I need to talk to their animal for them. I feel like for me personally that when I did a year-long psychic training program to develop my intuitive abilities and to give myself structure and accountability, because I wasn't going to practice on my own. I really needed that accountability of showing up for class once a week in order to get that structured into it for myself. And when I finished that, I was not really still reliable in talking to animals. And the class was to be a psychic for humans, right? Because they didn't have training back then to talk to animals. But going into it, I knew I wanted to use those skills to talk to animals. And it wasn't until I really cleared some big blocks around people won't believe me, why should they trust me, I'm not trustworthy, that it then opened up to be the realization I had was I had this ability inside of me all along. I just didn't give myself permission to access it because unconsciously I was blocking it. But the other side of it was now I had all this training and then I could just go on fast forward. Mm-hmm. And so once I did have that, the blocks were removed, the ability was there, I could then refine that ability with practice and focus and, specific exercises and that sort of thing. So it's since that point, and then I became a professional about a year later. Since that point, I don't know that I've ever not been able to connect in some way with an animal. I don't think that has ever happened to me, although I think there's definitely been degrees of like, wow, that was a really easy session, that everything was just right there all the time. I got tons of information. And I do have sometimes an animal communication session where I'm like, okay, I have to refocus, I have to reset. Am I thinking about something else? And I have to work hard. I really have to work to focus to make it all fit together. I haven't figured out why that is yet, when it happens and when it doesn't. Mm-hmm. But also your experience, I think, is incredibly common, that people will get these little blips and flips here and there. And they're like, oh, how did that happen? How do I make it happen again? I don't know what I was doing. What was I doing? Yeah. How did, and I think that's where most of us start. We, in whatever area, if it's talking to angels or plants or animals or whatever, but that's a great sign and you can build on that. And yeah. It's, and from there, it's actually way easier than you think.
Right. And you have to build that trust in yourself, right? It's not only the practice, but trusting that this is legitimate, and that's
and I think
that's a step for a lot of
tracks us. In the same, because that's what I see my students go through. I teach an introductory 12-week class, and there's the tools of intuition, and then there's the personal development of how do I learn to trust that this is real? How do I undo all that social conditioning that I've had up until this point of my life of you're making stuff up, or intuition isn't real, or, get a real job, or, all those kinds of things. And I think they go together. And the more that you get practice doing it, the more that reinforces this is real. I can trust it. And it's kind of like, forward on one and then forward on the other and then forward on one. So it's like taking steps with two different kind of feet in a sense.
That makes sense. So, from where you stand as a scientist, as an animal communicator, as someone who also works, I think, in coaching and human development, what do you see as the most important thing for humans to be working on right now, especially in regard to the human earth, human nature, human animal, human plant relationships? What stands out for you as the most constructive and healing place for us to put our focus?
I think we have to focus on ourselves. I think that we need to reframe upsets and look at them as opportunities to go deeper underneath. And I'm just going to say this because this is where my mind is going. Back in June, when I guess it was May, when it really hit the fan with the George Floyd murder and all of that stuff, and the appropriate focus on racism in this country, and the brutality of the system, right? The patriarchal system that is an artifact of colonialism and all of this tribalism that our species came to being within, but I hope is growing out of. So I did I just started rolling the camera on myself on my blog, and I think that what I said there is what I think is the answer to your question, because I don't think that racism is the problem. I don't think that I don't think, I think in terms of the individual. And to me, racism is a symptom of this separation sickness, what in Africa they call the great separation sickness, what I call the illusion of separation. It's this somehow fundamental belief inside of ourselves that we are separate from source, and that we are separate from anybody else. And so wherever we can identify somebody as different from ourselves, we separate ourselves from them.
So whether it's an animal or a human. Yeah.
Whether it's an animal, whether it's a human, whether it's a gender, whether it's, a sexual preference, whether it's a religion, all of those things are, to me, symptoms of the same thing. So when you ask, what should we be focusing on? We should be focusing on the places inside of ourselves where we identify ourselves as different from anybody or anything else on the planet. It's really hard for me. I walk by a redwood tree every day. And I walk through the park every day, and there's all kinds of trees, but there's this one redwood tree, and I have come to have a relationship with this tree and really recognize it as an individual with its own divinity, its own life history, its own sense of self. And I think that I'm still working towards more of that, right? I want more of that in me. But I think that when we start to see the divinity in ourselves, see the old hurts and heal the old hurts and the wounds that we carry with us, that all come from a sense of there's something wrong with me, or there's somebody different, I'm different in some way, either in a good way or a bad way. All of that judgment about ourselves and the world has to stop. I think that is the fundamental thing that humanity has to do. And to me, this is growing in consciousness. It's spiritual healing. It's personal growth. It's finding peace. It's the antidote to the craziness of a digital world that we live in, of consumerism. And so I think we really need to go within, find the places that hurt, heal those places, and allow more love to flow through us.
Yeah, I hear you, because the shorthand I would give that is unity consciousness. And when we cultivate that, we act from compassion, right? I left my work the other day to try with my daughter to rescue an injured cat. And there were some reasons why I wasn't sure if I could do it, but I couldn't sit here. I could not sit here at my desk and try to focus on my work, knowing from my son that he had found this injured cat. And, I also don't use any pesticides or anything dangerous in my yard because I can't handle the pain of knowing that I would be hurting other beings, right? And so I don't offer myself as a model of advanced unity consciousness, but we can all experience that, right? As you cultivate that sense of we're all living beings in this together, then you don't want to hurt anyone or anything. You want to help everyone as you can, and every other creature or being.
Absolutely. I love that phrase. And I think that we're all walking on the same path. And I don't think either one of us thinks we've gotten to the end. Like, there's plenty more work to do. And yet we have done this work for a while, right? And so we've gotten through a lot of the stuff that is the big boulders of work. And we're maybe down to some smaller stones or something like that. But that, I think, is the path that humanity has to be on. And I think that as individuals, we, if we're hurting inside ourselves, we're going to lash out and hurt others. And what we do to ourselves, we do to others. And what we do to others, we do to ourselves. And what your story demonstrates is that real understanding of the power you have. You have the power to make a difference. And so, of course, you want to, right? And you also are acting out of your values, right? Like this, caring for others is caring for myself, is caring for my family, is caring for my community. Right. And that has a higher value to me than finishing my work that I said I was going to do by the time I said I was going to do it.
Yeah. I think you're right to mention power, because I think that's another really important step, is for people to feel more empowered in a truer, more compassionate way, right? Not looking for power over another person or over an animal, but recognizing I am empowered to help. I am actually empowered to change this world by how I live in it.
Right.
And I think so many people still feel, well, that problem is huge, and so why should I bother? And in fact, I hear this from people I'm teaching. It would be really good if we could do X, but it would be too hard. And that's a lack of empowerment, right? So maybe we're switching from that abusive power over to the self-empowerment and the empowerment with others that is also really needed right now.
I completely agree. And I think that, the interesting thing of the last 6 months, because it's July 2020 as we're recording this, and we've been in various stages of quarantine for 4 to 5 months, depending on where we are in the world. And when you have kind of freedoms taken away, I can't do that. I can't go to the gym. I can't go to the movies. The interesting process for me has become to flip that and say, what can I do? And what I can do is I can do yoga in my living room. I can go run in the park instead of on a treadmill at the gym, and I think that reframe of really recognizing, no, I cannot solve racism on the planet, but can I be kind to this person in front of me? I can do that. And so, I think it goes back to Stephen Covey, right? Wasn't it I think he was one of the ones who talked about, first seek to understand, and then, be understood, but also to really start to recognize what's within my domain and what's outside of my domain. Global racism is outside of my domain, but my personal interactions are within my domain, and I can make efforts at the grocery store. I can make efforts walking on the path when I'm with my dogs every morning. And I can have an impact there. And I think if we can just start to flip that question to what can I do,
Right.
it's automatically empowering, and it automatically gets us out of overwhelm and it's too big and we can't, because we just saw that the whole freaking globe can come together for something nobody thought could be done, right? So we know that, another lesson from this time is that we can. Those things that we say can't be done, they absolutely can be done. We just have to find the way.
I feel that so strongly as someone with a background in history. Don't you tell me we can't do X or Y. Look at all the times that we've done unthinkable things as human beings. And we could turn around the environmental problems on this planet in 5 to 10 years. We could solve a lot of them and put every single one of them on a pathway toward immense healing if everybody would wholeheartedly make some kind of a shift and contribution. And we could solve cruelty to animals too, right? I mean, that's not something that you and I can solve right now on a global basis, but if more people felt more empowered to act in their own sphere on behalf of animals, we'd have a totally different human-animal set of circumstances within a very short time.
And I think it all comes back to, again, what can I do, and what has to be healed. Rumi said, ours is not to seek love, ours is to remove all the barriers inside ourselves to love. And that's that self-empowerment. What can I heal in myself that will allow me to see this in a different way, and then therefore to act in a different way? So for me, it always comes back to the power of the individual, and we have the power in our consciousness. It's immense, it's unstoppable, it's unlimited potential, and it has the power to heal anything inside of us, so that we can see things differently, so we can act differently, so we can solve problems that we couldn't see solutions to before.
Beautiful. So what are you bringing forth in your work now, or offering, that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, I think along with this conversation is so timely, because I am putting the finishing touches on my next book, which is called Animal Chakras: How to Balance, Heal, and Unblock Chakras for Your Pets for More Health, Harmony, and Happiness. And it goes into all of this, believe it or not, right? So it's really about empowering people to heal themselves and their pets, and to recognize the potential and the power in that relationship to heal ourselves and to heal them, and to therefore heal the planet. So it's just a very different perspective. So I'm super, super, super excited about that book coming soon. And we've, touched on a couple of my programs, but I do have How to Talk to Your Pet, which teaches any animal lover how to become an animal communicator. I have the Animal Wisdom Circle for anybody who is an animal lover, who is looking for wisdom from somebody outside themselves, and ways to become their best selves by connecting with animals. I take everybody through everything they need to know to be able to have an intuitive conversation with an animal every month. And then we heal ourselves. So we get the wisdom from the animals, and we go, okay, that's, non-attachment, to use the butterfly example. What am I attached to in my world? And what do I need to heal in order to feel more freedom around that part of my life? And so we come back and we have a lot of different techniques and group coaching that we do to heal those things. And those are my, my big things. I'm also training animal communicators to be professionals, because I think that our expression in the world has to be in alignment. Our financial abundance has to be in alignment with sharing our gifts.
Yes.
So for me, everything is about how do we become better people, and how do we connect more deeply with animals. And those are just some of the ways that we're doing it over here.
Yeah. So wonderful and rich. So anyone can find you at caragubbins.com, CARAGUBBINS.com. And as we close our conversation today, I would like you to tell us what do you imagine when you think about what life on Earth can be like as we keep healing ourselves and we harmonize our relationship with animals and plants and the planet? There are 7 or 8 billion ways to envision that. And I think it's really important that we talk about that so that people can have a sense of kind of a healing optimism of where we might be going. So what do you like to imagine when you think about that?
When I think about that, I really picture a world in which people are not in pain, that people aren't suffering, that they feel like they are who they are and that they're okay with that they're here for a purpose, and they are taking action on that purpose and making a difference in the world, and that they recognize their gifts that they're here to share. And they recognize that they're here to learn lessons, and that lessons come in all these different forms. And I think when we start there, we automatically extend that love and honor and respect to other people, to animals, to environments, to habitats, to lifestyle choices. And for me, that vision is really about living in a way that we honor and see the beauty in each one of us, in each being. There's a really beautiful, namaste, the soul in me recognizes the soul in you. And it's a great place to start. And there's a really beautiful Buddhist prayer that talks about may all beings be free, may all beings, love. I forget exactly how it goes, but that's what that would be the fundamental context for me. And how that would play out would be, there's just so many endless possibilities to really just learn how to love and live in harmony in whatever way that means. And for me, that means that the environment is taken care of, it's not abused, that there is no more greed, there's no more otherness, there's no more bullying, there's no separation. There's really looking into another being's eyes, whether it's a human or an animal, and seeing yourself there and treating that animal the way you would treat yourself, ideally. But if we can't treat ourselves the best, how you would treat your grandmother or your mother or whoever, your baby, your pet dog, but to just see that inside that other being's eyes, there is a being just like you with the same experiences, the same desires, and the same needs, and to be able to honor those needs in ourselves and others in whatever way is appropriate. That would be what I'd like to see on the planet.
Wonderful. I uphold that vision. On that really nice note, I think we will close for today. Thank you so much, Cara. It was just a delight to talk with you and get to know you better. Again, anyone who wants to know more about Dr. Cara's work can find her at caragubbins.com. If you appreciate the Humans and Earth podcast, please spread the word and give us a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast distribution site. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to Humans and Earth. Please share this episode to broaden engagement in the regeneration our world needs. You'll find social media links in the show notes. To explore our other offerings, visit www.humansandearth.com.